Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Gedling series. This is a small district to the east of Nottingham and it only has 12 of them. Mind you, it's got some belters. Let's take a look. Welcome back to Gedling again, people. We've only got 4 left to cover in this part of Nottinghamshire, but within the last 4 there's still a bit of mining history to talk about. We've seen plenty of former coal mines in this part of the world, haven't we? Well, here we've got another mining wheel which acts as a memorial to a former colliery, which of course no longer exists anymore. You'll find this one in one of the biggest villages that Gedling has, and it's called Calverton. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Calverton, Calf Farm. Hello Gedling, it's been a little while again. With only 4 left to cover in the district today, we tackle the second largest here in terms of size, Calverton. There's quite a bit to cover in this one. Calverton, which is often pronounced Carverton due to the derivation of its name, Calf Farm, lies in a small valley about 7 miles northeast of Nottingham and was for most of the latter half of the 20th century associated with coal mining. Now gone, the scars left by Calverton Colliery can still be seen north of the village where most of its workers lived. We've heard all that before though, haven't we? The mining history is only a small part of Calverton's past. During most of its existence, this was a forest village in a part of Sherwood known as Thorney Wood Chase. Its rural economy was limited by a lack of grazing land, and so handicrafts like woodworking and framework knitting were commonplace. Calverton can even claim to be the birthplace of the stocking frame, thanks to a man named William Lee. In this episode, we'll see quite a few churches, schools and pubs, but we'll also see something paranormal perhaps, because plenty of the locals have before now. Calverton has at least 6 properties which are haunted and a road which many people avoid at night. Did that put me off? Not at all. Before we get to Calverton, we first have to deal with Saltersford. Located to the north of the main village, Saltersford is little more than a small cluster of buildings on this one lane. Mind you, one of those buildings is an independent preparatory school called Saltersford House. You might just catch the entrance to that here on the right. It has over 90 pupils and it's been in operation since 1981. Saltersford also has a natural burial ground called Tithe Green. It's a deserted medieval village primarily. It may well have originated as a place where salters literally used a ford at a low-lying point on a trackway through Sherwood Forest, which is now Old Rufford Road. There was definitely once a watermill and a manor house here too, occupied by Sir Thomas Hutchinson in the 17th century. He was the father of the Roundhead Colonel John Hutchinson. Now demolished, the site of the house was ploughed up by the 5th Duke of Portland in the 19th century to make way for flood meadows. Between Saltersford and Calverton there's a war memorial, but it's well hidden and the average passerby simply wouldn't know it was there. It's on a patch of land called Watchwood Plantation, and it commemorates the deaths of 3 Polish airmen whose aircraft crashed at that spot. The crash happened on October 13, 1940, when the craft, flown by members of No. 300 Mosovian Squadron, was making a return to RAF Swinderby after a successful bombing raid. The plane was badly damaged and never made it to Swinderby. It came down just north of Calverton, killing the 3 men instantly. All 3 are buried at Wilford Hill Cemetery in Nottingham. In 1995, the Calverton branch of the Royal British Legion gave the original memorial a makeover, and these pictures show it as it is today. Annually, and on the day before Remembrance Sunday, a homage takes place to the memorial, where representatives from the Polish community usually come to pay their tribute. And while we're on the subject of things which aren't in the main village, here's a little bit about Springwater Golf Club, which takes up a chunk of land north of Calverton, but straddles the parish boundary with Woodborough. It bills itself as one of the most interesting and friendly golf courses in Nottinghamshire. Uniquely designed to provide a challenge for low handicap golfers, at the same time Springwater still provides those with a higher handicap a course which they can play and enjoy. It's a magnificent 18-hole, 6,262-yard course set in 125 acres of undulating parkland. Calverton also has a second golf-related landmark, the Ramsdale Park Golf Centre. That's west of the village off Main Street. It has 2 courses, both named after important figures in Calverton's history. The Seeley course is a par 71, designed by Martin Hawtrey, and the Lee course is a par 3, designed for time-pressed golfers, beginners, or those honing their skills. Both have a full 18 holes. Our walk begins at the Calverton Colliery Memorial in the northwestern reaches of the village. It wasn't until the opening of the colliery by the National Coal Board that the village began to assume its present identity. 1952 is the date given on this old pit wheel, but it was back in the 1930s when the idea of a colliery in Calverton was first suggested. Coal mining was planned here with a huge eye on the future. It was believed back then that it would yield 100 million tonnes of coal and provide employment for 125 years. That prediction fell away short though, as the mine closed in 1999. Part of the colliery has now become an industrial estate, occupying this lane that once led to the pit. Perhaps one of the biggest remnants of mining history here are working men's clubs, and Calverton has 2. This is New Top Club on Hollinwood Lane, better known to many as the Calverton Miners' Welfare. It's had a bit of a makeover in recent times, and it's still a popular venue today, despite the loss of the pit 25 years ago. The other club, with a connection to the northeast of England, is in the village centre. Close by up here is a St John Ambulance Training Centre, directly opposite the former pit. Of course, where there was a colliery, there were usually recreational activities. Calverton Miners' Welfare Football Club were founded shortly after the end of World War II. In the late 1990s, they were founder members of the Nottinghamshire Senior League, the 11th tier league, which they still play in today. Let's move away from the colliery now. This house is Hollinwood Lodge. It's a listed building which dates back to around 1800, and mining-wise, it's seen it all come and go. And just before you hit Main Street, you pass these rather out-of-place looking gates. I wonder what once stood here. Now, Calverton Colliery was to the north of the village. It was between the village and Saltersford, and you can still see the remains of it on overhead maps, and there's all sorts of things. If you look at that, you can tell it was a colliery. You can tell where the workings were. We can't get to it, obviously, because it's all private land and it probably wouldn't be safe anyway. So, to get to Calverton sort of village itself, the sort of main central area, shall we say, we have to walk from where the colliery was down Main Street, which is a long road. I can tell you how long it is. I'm outside number 301 here. That tells you just how far we've got to walk into the centre of the village. Better get on with it, haven't we? So this is Main Street, and probably one of the longest anywhere in Nottinghamshire. It stretches for well over half a mile to the village centre. There are several bus stops along its length, but none of them are currently in use. The village is, though, served by 2 buses, the 747 between Loudham and Oxton, and the Calverton, which runs to Nottingham. No buses were used here, though. It was a gentle trot on foot for me into the small valley that Calverton lies in. As the centre gets closer, the buildings get older. This one is the local Scout headquarters, but it used to be something else. This was an old school. Calverton has had plenty of those in its time, and it still does. Prior to the 1800s, education for the less well-off was generally restricted to the occasional charity school. Calverton's children were fortunate enough, however, to benefit from the bequest of a village native, Jonathan Lebray, a Nottingham hosiery manufacturer. He has a street named after him now on a housing estate north of Main Street, largely constructed for the workers at Calverton Colliery. Main Street itself is much older. Before coal, this was a rural agricultural village with a small population. This next building is an old village hall located on the corner of Mews Lane. This has now been replaced by a brand new one, which we'll catch later, near the end. The little brick enclosure in front of it is Calverton Pinfold, a lasting reminder that this village wasn't always about coal. It's believed that somewhere close to this area there once stood a cross, which has now been lost. Also gone is Calverton Hall, which stood where Old Hall Close is today, just a little further up the road. Its principal resident was Lady Catherine Sherwood, widow of Sir John, who we'll talk about later. Part of the hall's parkland is now used as a playground and the James Seeley playing fields, both of which can be seen here. A few steps further we come to the first of the pubs. This is the Admiral Rodney, which is also the oldest in Calverton. This is named after Admiral George Bridges Rodney, an 18th century British naval officer. He was best known for his part in the American War of Independence, and it's often claimed that he was the commander to have pioneered the tactic of breaking the line. Several pubs carry his name, but only this one has a bust of the man himself outside. Okay, we're still not quite in the village centre. We've come down Main Street a long way now and down a hill. We are certainly in a valley now. The land here is definitely a lot more low-lying than it is near the colliery. And things are starting to become a little bit more commercial, shall we say. Behind me there you can see a petrol station. If you need petrol here in Calverton, well, you can definitely get some. And the prices are pretty reasonable actually. 144.9 for unleaded and 149.9 for diesel. I'll tell you something, that's a lot cheaper than my local petrol station. This building is the Calverton Folk Museum, dedicated to the Victorian history of the village. It's an old stockinger's cottage, and inside there are 4 rooms, each with multiple exhibits, one of which is a framework knitting machine. The museum opens on the last Sunday of every month during the summer. Next door is Calverton Baptist Church. Built in 1907, it was originally used by the Primitive Methodists. Their original building, erected in 1783, was first used by a secret religious sect known as the Rowites, an offshoot of the Quaker movement. That chapel has now been demolished. Almost next door is St Wilfrid's School, a Victorian building that's been here since 1892. It was first used by Calverton's National School, which moved here from Burner Pool, further down Main Street. Even though the old school still stands, Burner Pool is a private street, so we won't be able to see it. No such issues with Calverton Fish Bar on the other side of the road, mind you. This is one of the many food outlets in the village. You're almost spoilt for choice in that regard here. Next door is a florist's and a barber's shop, and after those I left Main Street briefly for the first time in what felt like ages. Now we're on the Nook, where we find the Baptist Church Hall. This narrow lane is a dead end, but on foot you can cut through a car park via a gap in a fence. The car park belongs to the former White Lion pub on the corner of Mansfield Lane and Main Street. Once popular with pool teams, this is the second oldest pub in Calverton after the Admiral Rodney. It would later become the Banduke Indian Restaurant, but at present the building lies empty. We've now hit the middle of the village. You can tell because shops are coming into view. This one here used to be Gascoigne's estate agents. Okay, here we are then at a parish notice board. We'll just get this job out of the way. And there you go, Calverton is done. That's 9 down and 3 to go. Now, there is a little shopping precinct in the middle of Calverton, and if you need to access it, you easily can from this little car park here. 2 hours free parking in this little car park there. More than enough spaces for everybody as well. So what we're going to do now, we're going to head through the shopping precinct, which you can see there. It's a pedestrianised area, and this will take us into a residential area next. Kicking us off in this central precinct is a library. That's the building you can see here on the right. This has a stone set into its wall, which is worth a mention. In May 1974, the village was officially twinned with Long Jumel in the Loire Valley of France. This stone confirms that twinning. The precinct otherwise features some household names when it comes to shops. It's got a Sainsbury's local and a branch of the popular British bakery, Greggs. Even in this heat, the steak bakes smelt tempting, but that's typical of me to be thinking about food. Let's continue through this pedestrianised area. It brings you to a second car parking area, in front of which stands a dental surgery. Along the left-hand side of this large square is another row of shops, including another fish bar and a cafe, as well as a veterinary centre and a funeral director's. This is definitely a village that's not short of anything. Now we're out onto Crookdole Lane, which has the local post office and a third car parking area next to the Dragonfly's Day nursery over the road. You can also get to the parish church from here via a footpath between Crookdole Lane and Main Street. Let's go check that out, shall we? St Wilfrid's Church dates mainly from the 14th century, when it was reconstructed with material from an older building. The nave and tower were rebuilt between 1760 and 63, and in 1835 the chancel was reconstructed too. The nave has the somewhat unusual form of a wide parallelogram, 42 feet long and 37 feet wide. St Wilfrid's contains a carved panel of a bearded bishop and another man. It's believed to represent St Wilfrid himself, either with a newly baptised convert or in the act of manumission, as the freeing of slaves was a distinguishing feature of the bishop's career. We're back to Main Street, and this next section sees us pass another shop, this time Cream Beauty, before heading east towards Bonner Lane. Because Main Street is the oldest part of Calverton, almost everything on it falls within the boundary of a conservation area. 13 of the 17 listed buildings the village has are on Main Street, including the former vicarage, known today as Calverton House. Bonner Lane also falls within the conservation boundary. It takes its name from either the Old English word burner or the Old Norse word brunner. Both mean spring or stream. Briefly mentioned back at the museum, framework knitting was practised here. Windle Square is a row of cottages once lived in by framework knitters. They date from 1834, but were renovated exactly 140 years later by the Nottinghamshire Building Preservation Trust. Not far up the road is the Gleaners Inn, which first appears in records in 1861 after its liquor licence was refused. It stands on the site of an older unnamed alehouse and was rebuilt in the 1930s, which makes it the newest of the pubs in Calverton. Alright, it's time for a montage now as we head through that housing estate. Now we're on Mansfield Lane, and this is St Anthony's Chapel of Ease. It's a Catholic church which is served from Southwell. The present church was built in 1993, replacing a prefabricated building on the same site which had been in use as a chapel since 1945. Further down Mansfield Lane we have Calverton's second working men's club. Opened in 1966, this is known as the Geordie Club because of the number of Northumberland miners who came from the northeast to work the Calverton pit. You might remember the same thing happened at Rufford Colliery at nearby Reneth. Next to the club is a coal truck, another poignant reminder of the mining history. There's an information board to go with it, but this also talks about William Lee, one of the most important men in Calverton's industrial past. William Lee invented the stocking frame. That is an undeniable fact. However, historians have argued for a long time where he was actually from. Documentary evidence for his birthplace is scant and contradictory. Both nearby Woodborough and a village in Sussex claim him to be theirs, but Calverton's claim to William Lee is considered to be the strongest. The final stages of the walk. There are still a couple of things still to see. There are a couple of schools, there's another church, there's the village hall and a few other oddments as well as we make our way back up the hill to where we began, near the Colliery Memorial. The religious building in question is Calverton Methodist Church on Collier Road. A modern building, this is now the only one for Methodists in the village, in stark contrast to the many it had in the 19th century. After the church, Calverton becomes all about schools. There's a central area within this estate that has no less than 3 of them, as well as this children's centre or family hub. You can probably hear some children in the background of this next shot. They are the kids of Manor Park Infant School and Nursery, which was originally a 4-class mixed primary, opened in 1955. Beyond those, a green space to the left provides a magnificent view of the surrounding countryside. Let's not forget, after all, Calverton is in a lush green valley. Onto Flats Lane, there's another row of shops and amenities, including a branch of the Co-op and a cafe, amongst other things, but we're now in the vicinity of Colonel Frank Seeley Academy. This is its 6th form block, which used to be William Lee School. A secondary school which became an academy in 2017, this opened in 1957. Colonel Frank Seeley was a former High Sheriff of Nottinghamshire and a councillor for Calverton. This school's notable alumni include the badminton player Chris Adcock, figure skater and Olympic gold medalist Christopher Dean, geneticist Neil Hall, and Mark Spencer, the Conservative MP for Sherwood. The school complex also includes Calverton Leisure Centre, which has 3 swimming pools. And we return to Flats Lane again, which is otherwise residential, except for one final school on the right-hand side. That would be the Sir John Sherbrooke Junior School, named after the British soldier and native of nearby Oxton who became the Governor-General of British North America. Now, of course, being as Calverton is a really big village, there's no way on earth I can walk down every street. And even so, if I tried to attempt that, that task would be even more impossible these days than it would have been about 10 or 20 years ago, because Calverton has well and truly expanded. These houses you can see behind me here, these aren't even marked on my map, and that just tells you how many houses have gone up in recent times. I'm sure there's going to be more. Okay, it's a left turn here and it'll take us towards the village hall, and we're not far away from the inn now. Calverton Village Hall is one of the newest buildings here, having opened just last year. It stands on the William Lee Memorial Park and replaced the old village hall on Main Street. Available for hire, the facility accommodates functions for up to 250 people. The hall has 2 sets of home, away and referee changing rooms that are up to FA standards. The football pitch on the adjoining sports complex is rather humorously known as the Can Zero. As a fan of Italian football, I can appreciate that. To finish with, it's another montage, this time the streets off and around Collier Road. Okay, and we are back to the start. We've walked around Calverton and that's taken me about an hour and 3/4. I'm quite happy with that because I allowed 2 hours to do that. It's a big old place. Now, there are plenty of ways that you can come into Calverton and plenty of ways that you can go out of Calverton. And I'm going to take one road in particular to leave this village behind. And the reason I've chosen this road is because apparently it's haunted. Let's go for a drive and see if any ghoulies appear on the road or even in the back of my car. This is George's Lane, twisty, hilly and at times quite a dark road with low overhanging trees. It would provide any driver with a stern test of their skills, but reputedly the road is the least of your worries. Many who have driven this have reported paranormal activity, so much so that some even refuse to drive on it anymore. It might look alright here, but at night it's a different animal. Dark figures have been seen crossing the road, and even ghostly hitchhikers have suddenly appeared in the back seat of cars. In a lay-by halfway up the hill, an apparition of a woman has been reported on several occasions. Legend has it the lady died whilst walking up the hill in the snow on her wedding day. And off the lane is Foxwood, known by some locals as the Witch's Wood due to its alleged connections to witchcraft. So in short, don't drive this road at night, especially if you believe in all that sort of stuff. Mind you, staying in the village instead could also give you the spooks. There are countless other tales of paranormal activity in the village itself. The Admiral Rodney is supposedly haunted by both a former barmaid and the spirit of a man in a tweed suit with a big beard. The landlords believe his name is Tom. Inside the Calverton Folk Museum, there's a sinister and oppressive feel, so much so that tradesmen have refused to work in it alone. Calverton Hall was haunted as well by at least 2 ghosts, one of which was a female who was often seen walking through its walls. And if all that wasn't enough, the village also has a well-documented UFO sighting. A local woman out walking her dogs in 1991 reported seeing a bright orange and white cross in the sky. Of course, all of this could be nonsense and just the stuff of folklore, but you can see why Calverton is considered to be the most haunted village in England by many. I can confirm though that no ghoulies appeared on this drive or in my back seats. See you next week, folks. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.